So I'm here on Mackinac Island, which is the only place in America which still has a ban on motor vehicles that's still in place from the 19th century. Motor vehicles were banned here on the island in 1898, and it actually became state law that motor vehicles would permanently be banned in the year 1960. Generally, Mackinac Island is a hopping summer destination for travelers from all over across the country and even across the world, as it's known as a good resort town, and the fact that vehicles were banned here was partly because they wanted to keep it a resorty and a place that people still wanted to come visit on their holidays. However, this clearly does not apply to snowmobiles, as you can see. There are snowmobiles all up and down this street. Although I'm sure some of you are surprised the Mackinac Island ferry is even open during the winter. Although it's not tourists they generally carry, there is an industry that goes on here during the winter, but we will get to that. But today, I'm just here to check out what exactly goes on here during the winter in one of Michigan's most famous places for tourism. So something a lot of people may not realize about Mackinac Island is that there are people who live here year-round. I believe there's about, I think it was 560 people who list this place as their year-round residents. And obviously, to keep a grocery store going, obviously people actually have to really live here. And obviously it's expensive to ship everything in. I actually went in there earlier. It's actually a pretty nice store, but I do think people often forget that this isn't just everybody's vacation. So I have been here once before during the summer. That was back in 2004. So I was a very little kid and I don't remember a ton about the island, to be entirely honest, but I do remember there were people all over the place. There were thousands of people here. I remember the ferry was packed on our way over. And obviously that was not the case today. The streets are practically empty, and I pretty much have the whole island to myself. So that makes it a lot more fun to explore, but obviously the downside of that is none of the shops are open. So I guess I had to pick my poison. Now, one of the very few things I remember about coming to Mackinac Island when I was a kid was that I went to this restaurant. Obviously it's not open this time of year, but still, I just find that really cool. Arch Rock is here, which is a very famous Michigan natural monument, and I think it'd make a really cool thing to see because usually people are all over it, everybody's trying to take a photo of it, but today I am the only person here. All right, so take a look at this. Look at this! Arch Rock is 146 feet tall and overlooks Lake Huron. It was actually believed to be a sacred place by Native Americans, however it is still a very important and key landmark on Mackinac Island, with roads leading up to it bearing its own name. I love how there's a sign here that says keep off, but let's just be honest. If you try to climb on this thing in the middle of winter, you're just dying for a Darwin Award. So there is a cave on Mackinac Island called Skull Cave. And I remember when I was here last, I was 6 years old. I remember my dad briefly mentioning that there was a small cave on the island, but we didn't get to see it. And now I realize just how small he meant by small. Like, I mean, I bet you I could barely crawl in that if I tried. I guess it is what it is. I would also like to mention that this is called Skull Cave because the Native Americans used to use this area as a burial ground. However, most of those bones have been repatriated already to local Native American tribes, so there aren't any skulls there anymore, but there's a reason why it's called that, and it wasn't a grisly reason. It's just, this is just where the Native Americans used to bury their dead. So this rock formation is known as Devil's Kitchen, and is right on the west coast of Mackinac Island. I think it's pretty cool. It's just like a bunch of holes and crevices that were carved into the rock by waves or wind, and they say it's one of the youngest rock formations on the island, but I just think that's really cool, like just how porous it is, and obviously Devil's Kitchen sounds kind of ominous, but I think that's all pretty cool, to be honest. Now, something you may be wondering is why is the Mackinac Ferry even open this time of year? I mean, it is early February, and there's a very simple explanation for it. Construction. Obviously, during the tourist season, when thousands of people come here every single day, they don't really have time or really the ability to be able to do repairs or make additions to anything. However, there is a lot of construction going on right now and today. That's pretty much everybody I've seen here. I have actually not run into a single tourist. I had everything on the inland of the island to myself. I did not run into one person. So by being elected the governor of Michigan, you actually get access to two different mansions. This is the summer governor's residence here on Mackinac Island. But lots of famous people have been here. All sorts of presidents have been invited here to spend like a summer or at least summertime here. It actually does do tours on Wednesdays during the summer. being a guest there is probably the biggest honor you can get by being a Michigander. My grandparents ran into Governor Milliken, who was on his way to this governor's mansion one spring, so I just think that is really awesome. And obviously if we were here during the summer, I don't even think security would let me get this close to the fence. So a really strange story about Mackinac Island is that originally it was a national park. In fact, it was the second national park after Yellowstone. In the year 1895, when Fort Michilimackinac up there was finally decommissioned, U.S. government pretty much abandoned the island, and that left it without a caretaker, and it was already known as a resort town. So the state government petitioned to be able to take over Mackinac Island and turn it into a state park. And that is the way it is today. So it may surprise you that Fort Michilimackinac was actually garrisoned by the U.S. military until the 1890s. This is a commanding officer's quarters that was built in the late 1800s. And although that may surprise some of you, you got to keep in mind that America's neighbor to the north wasn't always so friendly. Throughout the years, there were lots of fears about the United States being invaded by Canada, or Canada being invaded by the United States. So tensions were still high, and there were also garrisons in places like Detroit and other places along the border. But it wasn't until the late 1800s, early 1900s, that the entire US-Canadian border was completely demilitarized. So over my shoulder, we have one of Michigan's most famous hotels, and I'd even argue this is Michigan's most famous hotel. Obviously, it's out of season and under renovation, but the Grand Hotel was built in 1887 and was the preeminent place for anybody with wealth to go visit the island, even at the late 1800s through today. I have no idea how expensive it is, but I know that it's so fancy, they make you have to pay to walk on a balcony on the top. So it is quite the place to go, and to be quite honest, if I ever get a chance to spend a night at the Grand Hotel, I would consider a goal of my life fulfilled. This is the one thing I wish I got to see in the summer, because it is really something. So something a lot of people don't realize about Mackinac Island is that this island has been settled for longer than most of Michigan has. In fact, this church you see behind me was built in the 1780s originally on this island. There was also, I believe it was actually moved from St. Ignace in a place that was even older. I believe that even dates back to the 1600s, and that was built by the French. But this is an absolutely super old church. It has to be one of the oldest in Michigan just because this island was settled earlier, because it was an island, it was easy to get to and easy to traverse. And it's just kind of weird we kind of forget that the Upper Peninsula saw some of the earlier settlement in Michigan, or even though the Lower Peninsula is where most people live today. So correction, this church actually dates back to the year 1715 and has baptismal records going back all the way to the year 1695. So this is a super old church. So anyway, I actually enjoyed my day here on Mackinac Island in the middle of February. It was actually a lot of fun to see all this stuff, and basically have no competition to see everything because, you know, no tourists are here. It's pretty much just people working on construction and the people who live here. So I had a lot of fun today. I actually would do this again. It was a lot of fun. It's just kind of a colorful thing, and also I got to explore what America's only Carless community does during the winter. So I really enjoyed this one, and I hope I will see you on the next one.